Wendy Williams called it years ago, but nobody wanted to listen. While the world was celebrating the fairy tale reunion of Bennifer, the Queen of Talk was the only one pointing out the red flags that would eventually tear them apart. Today, we aren't just looking at a divorce, we're looking at a prophecy fulfilled. Wendy predicted that Ben Affleck's need for privacy and Jennifer Lopez's addiction to the spotlight were a ticking time bomb. And now we have the receipts that prove she was right all along. You clicked this video because you want to know. What exactly did Wendy see that everyone else missed? Why did J.Lo ignore the blatant warnings from her own inner circle? And how did a $20 million project meant to prove their love actually end up documenting their divorce? By the end of this video, you will understand the hidden mechanism behind Hollywood's most expensive breakup. Let's go back to the beginning of the end. Most people think the cracks started showing in 2024, but the reality is the friction was there from day one of the reunion. Wendy Williams, in her signature Hot Topic segment, famously analyzed the couple's dynamic. She pointed out a harsh truth. Ben Affleck is a man who has battled serious personal demons and craves a quiet, stable life. Jennifer Lopez, on the other hand, is a global brand who documents every waking moment. Wendy warned that Ben looked cleaned up for the cameras, but questioned how long he could play the role of the dutiful accessory in the J.Lo show. She knew that once the honeymoon phase ended, the fundamental incompatibility, his need for silence versus her need for noise, would become unbearable. And she was right. But here's the twist. Wendy wasn't the only one warning J.Lo. The most shocking evidence comes from J.Lo's own self-financed documentary, The Greatest Love Story Never Told. In a moment that is now painful to watch, Ben Affleck sits down and explicitly tells the camera his biggest fear. He says, "Getting back together, I said, listen, one of the things I don't want is a relationship on social media." He literally gave her a roadmap to keeping him happy. Keep it private. But then he admits, "I realized it's not a fair thing to ask. It's like marrying a boat captain and saying you don't like the water." This is the pivotal moment. Ben tried to compromise. He tried to suppress his own nature to fit into her world. But J.Lo didn't just ignore his warning, she monetized it. She took his private love letters he titled The Greatest Love Story Never Told, meant for her eyes only, and she showed them to her songwriters to inspire an album. In the documentary, Ben walks in and looks visibly uncomfortable, realizing his private thoughts are being turned into public content. He explicitly states on camera that he views those things as sacred, yet there he is, watching them being prepared for mass consumption. This wasn't a partnership, it was a content strategy, and Ben was the reluctant star. To understand why this betrayal of privacy was the final nail in the coffin, we have to look at the psychological weight of those letters. According to coverage in Variety from February 2024, Ben had kept these letters for 20 years. They were a physical representation of their history, a private archive of their bond. By handing them over to a room full of producers and musicians to mine for lyrics, J.Lo effectively told Ben that nothing is off limits if it can sell a ticket. It shattered the one condition he had set for their reunion. Now, let's look at the ego warning that came from another Hollywood legend. It wasn't just Ben feeling uneasy. Jane Fonda, a woman who knows a thing or two about high-profile marriages, sat J.Lo down in that same documentary and gave her a reality check. Fonda told her to her face, "I feel like you're trying to prove something instead of just living it." She warned her that the excessive public displays of affection felt forced, like she was trying to convince the world and maybe herself that they were happy. J.Lo laughed it off, but that clip has now aged like milk. Fonda saw exactly what Wendy saw, a performance, not a relationship. When you have to spend $20 million of your own money to make a movie proving you are in love, you're not convincing the audience, you're trying to convince your husband. The cracks weren't just in the documentary, they were live on national television. Remember the 2023 Grammys? The camera cut to Ben Affleck looking absolutely miserable, staring into space while J.Lo tried to get him to dance. It became an instant meme, but lip readers later revealed that J.Lo seemingly snapped at him saying, "Look more friendly, look motivated." Ben's response was a resigned, "I might." That moment was the perfect microcosm of their entire dynamic. J.Lo producing the scene and Ben refusing to follow the script. Wendy Williams often spoke about how J.Lo curates her image down to the smallest detail. But you cannot curate a grown man who doesn't want to be there. This leads us to the timeline of the collapse, which reveals just how calculated the split was. For months, the couple denied rumors. They were spotted wearing rings, then not wearing rings, engaging in a bizarre public dance. But the legal filings tell the real story. Jennifer Lopez filed for divorce on August 20th, 2024. That date is not random. It was the exact 2-year anniversary of their lavish Georgia wedding ceremony. Filing on an anniversary is a statement. It is a power move to reclaim the narrative. But here's the kicker. She listed the date of separation as April 26, 2024. Why does that date matter? Because it means for nearly 4 months, while they were promoting her movies, attending galas separately, and dodging questions, the marriage was already dead. They were legally separated while the world was still speculating. This 4-month gap suggests that the business of the divorce was being handled behind the scenes long before the public announcement. It explains why J.Lo attended the Met Gala solo in May, looking absolutely stunning but notably alone. The press asked where Ben was, and the excuse was work. The reality was they had already separated weeks prior. And speaking of business, reports indicate there was no prenup. Let that sink in. 2 of the wealthiest people in Hollywood with massive individual empires got married without a prenup. This means that any earnings made during their 2-year marriage could technically be community property. During this time, J.Lo launched her alcohol brand J.Lo, her movie Atlas, her album This Is Me Now, and the accompanying documentary. Ben produced the hit movie Air and filmed The Accountant too. The financial entanglement here is a nightmare. Without a prenup, the divorce proceedings aren't just about heartbreak. They're a forensic accounting of who paid for what. According to California law, assets acquired during the marriage are generally split 50-50. This raises the question, does Ben Affleck technically own half of the documentary that documented the demise of his own marriage? Does J.Lo have a claim to the profits of Air? The lawyers are going to have a field day. Then there's the house, the $60 million mansion in Beverly Hills. They spent 2 years looking for this forever home, finally bought it, and then listed it for sale in June 2024, just 1 year later. They listed it 2 months after the separation date, but 2 months before the divorce filing. The house was the physical symbol of their union, massive, expensive, and ultimately empty. Dumping the house was the first silent confirmation that Wendy's prediction had come true. Reports from TMZ indicate they are struggling to sell it without taking a loss, adding financial injury to emotional injury. But the most damning piece of evidence that the ego clash was fatal comes from the aftermath. Post-separation, Ben Affleck purchased a $20 million bachelor pad in the Pacific Palisades, ironically very close to his ex-wife Jennifer Garner. He immediately reverted to the quiet private life he always wanted. He was seen looking relaxed, getting fast food, and wearing casual clothes. Meanwhile, J.Lo spent her summer in the Hamptons, photographed riding bikes, hitting the gym, and smiling for the paparazzi, maintaining the image of the unbothered diva. It was a visual representation of their core conflict, Ben retreating to privacy and J.Lo stepping into the light to control the spin. Even her birthday party was a Bridgerton-themed extravaganza with a throne, but the king was missing. Wendy Williams always said that J.Lo needs a man to complete her image, but this summer proved she is willing to star in the show alone if the leading man quits. We also have to talk about the friends factor. It has been widely reported that Ben's inner circle, specifically Matt Damon, was never fully sold on the reunion. According to sources cited by the Daily Mail, Matt Damon was supportive but wary, knowing how the first Bennifer era nearly destroyed Ben's career. The constant media circus during the second marriage reportedly strained Ben's relationships with his oldest friends because he was constantly in crisis management mode. When Ben finally pulled the plug, it wasn't just a breakup, it was a return to his tribe. He chose his sanity and his oldest friendships over the high-maintenance demands of being Mr. Lopez. Wendy Williams often said that J.Lo falls in love hard and fast, but she loves the idea of love more than the reality of the person. She treats marriage like a movie production. It needs a high budget, great lighting, and a perfect script. But Ben Affleck isn't an actor in his personal life. He's a man who wanted a break from the script. The tragedy of Bennifer 2.0 isn't that they stopped loving each other, it's that they never actually agreed on what their life was supposed to look like. Ben wanted a home, J.Lo wanted a stage. In the end, telling the story is exactly what ruined the story. It is a lesson in the dangers of turning your personal life into content. When you invite the audience into your bedroom, you can't be surprised when they critique the performance. The expectation versus reality here is brutal. The expectation was that love conquers all, that 20 years of growth would make them compatible. The reality, as Wendy Williams predicted, is that people don't fundamentally change.
The same issues that broke them up in 2004, media scrutiny and pressure, broke them up in 2024. The only difference is that this time, they captured the entire breakdown in 4K resolution for a documentary that nobody watched. So where does this leave them? Ben is back in his comfort zone, co-parenting and working quietly. J.Lo is facing a public relations crisis, having canceled her This Is Me live tour to be with family, only to file for divorce months later. The brand took a hit because the authenticity was questioned. When you sell a love story as a product and the product fails, the consumer feels cheated. Wendy Williams may not be on the air anymore, but her legacy as a pop culture prophet is secure. She looked past the glamour and saw the human flaws. She warned that you cannot force a square peg into a round hole, no matter how photogenic the peg is. J.Lo ignored the warning. From Ben, when he said he hates social media, believe them. Do not spend $20 million trying to edit them into a different character. If you want to understand the full playbook of how celebrity PR teams spend these divorces to look like conscious uncoupling, you need to see the patterns we have uncovered in other high-profile splits.